collaboration is an easy thing to suggest, but obviously there's competition. Sometimes it can be seen as capitulation. You're giving up. But I think collaboration is a much bigger and broader issue than that. So we are going to have a conversation about that, collaboration between automakers, tech companies, and governments to build a sustainable EV ecosystem. So would you please welcome to the stage our moderator for this panel, CJ Arvind, who is a partner at Roland Berger. So CJ, would you like to make your way to the stage? Thank you. Very good. It's all yours, sir. Thank you. Show your appreciation. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I would like to invite the rest of the panel members as well on the stage. Anan, Ahmed, Dr. Andreas. I know Dr. Ahmed may not be here in the panel room, so we will see if he's able to join. And Mohammed as well. Please, if you can join me on stage. Perfect. Quite an interesting topic, but I also remember that the previous panel also had a very similar collaboration kind of topic which went on. So I do have a few, let's say, pointers which goes beyond just the collaboration side of things, looking at the market and so on. Again, given where we are today, right? So in the last months and weeks, of course, the whole tariff-related situation, there is quite a few, let's say, geopolitical changes which have happened, and that is kind of increasing the volatility. And even in terms of looking at the EV market outlook, there are many things which people, in specifically, let's say, OEM, suppliers, and so on, are still grappling with all these changes which are happening. And in fact, there are even economies which are looking at what to do in terms of, let's say, the short-term targets. Again, the long-term targets still seem to be in place, but at least in the short run, how to tackle with some of the competition which is coming from the different economies and so on. So that way, there still seems to be a bit of this decision volatility which is going on. So to kind of kick off that particular part of the discussion, right? So I would like to have one question maybe for Ahmed, for yourself, right? So just to set the base for our discussion in terms of looking at the overall electrification of transport. So if you can put together, why do we require this? What is the basis for kind of pursuing this so that we are all aligned on why this is required in the first place?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the panel and for the question. So let's take a few steps back. Why do we need transportation in the first place? People need to use different transportation modes to move people and goods from one place to the other. But for some reason, we took that to the extreme. So now we compete on the largest vehicle, the largest engine, which is the most powerful, et cetera, and that's what really is causing emissions. And if we look back today, all the science have proved that for the planet to stay healthy and people actually can live with it, or live on it, we need to reduce the global emissions to get the temperature increase below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Without getting into the science of all of this, what that actually means for the transportation sector, transportation today contributes to a little bit over 23%, 24% of the global emissions. So today, with the existing technology, we talk about electrification and EVs. If we electrify every single vehicle on the road today, again, if we electrify every single vehicle on the road today, we will not be able to get the transportation sector to be net zero. Because we have all of the vehicles that are already on the road, And that means you have to go what we call the avoid, shift, and improve. And that's a very important framework that we need to speak about, which is we need to avoid transportation where we can. So we all have seen during COVID that people didn't have to use transportation modes, and that what has been the impact on air quality, on the health issues, et cetera, et cetera. And today, there's a lot of different activities that we do today that we don't really have to do them from the location. Like remote working is now enabling a lot of people to work with the same productivity, but from home, and other different activities as well. That's one. But for sure, not every single activity can be done remotely. So that's where you need to shift to more sustainable modes of transportation. So that's where we need to enable more public transport infrastructure, shared mobility. All of this will contribute to reducing the transportation emissions. What you cannot avoid or shift, then you come to the improve section. So, and that's where we need, yes, we need to electrify, not just passenger vehicles, but commercial vehicles and public transportation. But also we need to enforce more fuel efficiency standards. So the ICE vehicles that are being sold, they can be more fuel efficient, which will also eventually result into reduced emissions. So if that don't happen together with electrification, the emission quota for the transportation sector will be fully consumed by 2032. Again, so if we don't do the avoid, shift, and improve together, the quota for the emissions quota for the transportation sector will be fully consumed by 2032. So that's much like 18 years earlier than what this budget should be consumed at, which is 2050. So that shows you how significant the effort have to be done in that specific category. And the other point is we are moving from a sector that has been heavily dominated by two or three countries in terms of the manufacturing and the industry, to a sector that's being created where there's an opportunity for every single country to capitalize on in terms of the value chain. So today, Saudi UAE have been putting a lot of investment to localize manufacturing, not just for the vehicle, but for the different components across the value chain. Speaking of the batteries, speaking of the different components that get into the car, that's a new industry, new opportunities, new jobs that are being created for those countries. And that's an opportunity that every single country should be aware of. So now China is manufacturing over 2/3 of the global battery supply chain. Almost half of the EVs being manufactured in China. And there's an opportunity, especially for the region, with relatively low labor costs compared with Europe and the US, to actually take part or be part of that industry. Again, some efforts have been done into this, but it could be done in a much more accelerated way. So the economic opportunity as well. And the last point I want to conclude with is actually the direct impact of the health. So EVs don't have tailpipe emissions. Yes, there's emissions associated with the manufacturing of the EV, starting from the mining of the minerals and the manufacturing of the vehicle itself. But in terms of tailpipe emissions, you don't have them. And that will have a direct impact on the air quality, the air that we breathe, and accordingly the health issues. And what that means on the long term is you have a lot of financing or fund that normally would be spent into the infrastructure of the healthcare system, because you have all of these diseases that you have to treat, that now you can allocate all of these funds to actually education, to manufacturing, to job creation, et cetera, other areas where the country can actually benefit from. And that's what we call the impact that a lot of people, the cost of inaction. So if you don't act now, there's a cost on you that you will feel it on the long term. Perhaps you don't feel it now, but you feel it on the long term. And that's actually a financial cost that the country will have to carry. So putting the right infrastructure today, whether it's regulatory infrastructure, charging infrastructure, as the previous sessions talk about, is very essential to enable all of this movement to happen in a healthy way. Yeah.
Thanks, Ahmed. Yeah, I think you hit a very critical point, which is in terms of the industry was previously dominated by one or two economies, and now this is far widespread. And I think China, as we all know, is at the forefront of this particular value chain across the different technologies and so on. So I think given Andreas has, let's say, worked in China as well and is, let's say, currently representing some of the Chinese OEM brands as well, I think it would be good to get your views in terms of what are the things which, let's say, some of these manufacturers are pursuing currently, which could be applicable for UAE, and also looking at the overall, let's say, volatility which is going on in the market right now, what could be the benefit for UAE in terms of attracting some of these Chinese investments or investors into either addressing the infrastructure requirements or, let's say, building the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, Arvind, thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, I have lived in China for 5 years. I've worked there. I've worked for a German car manufacturer initially. So I think it is fair to say that we see the biggest change in the automotive landscape that we have ever seen since the invention of the automobile. And this change actually will lead us to an entirely new landscape, entirely new technologies, new players. Some of the players, existing players, they will actually disappear, and I think some of the players which we just see emerging will actually become stronger and stronger. So the whole automotive landscape is changing dramatically fast, and from my perspective, having worked in Europe, having worked for an American automotive company and also in China, I definitely see that China has put a lot of efforts, 15 years ago on electrification, and they are harvesting all their work that they have actually put into this very, very long time ago. And for many reasons, the other countries didn't decide to go full electric for many reasons, mainly because there is existing infrastructure, there's very refined technology in Europe, so there are different technologies. At the end of the day, the customer will pick actually the technology that he wants to pick. There's certainly nobody telling him, how to drive a car, when to drive a car, and what car he is supposed to drive. I don't believe in this. I think it's the customer who will actually decide on the technology, and we see China just emerging very, very fast. So today, China is the largest automotive market in the world, with over 30 million vehicles. And out of those 30 million vehicles, more than 50% is now electric. So, I mean, so the biggest car market in the world is like the majority of all vehicles are electric. And I think if you just go around here and you see outside and you get a glimpse on the offers which are outside, you already get a very strong feeling on, like this massive change that we are expecting to see over the next years. So the electric, I think what Ahmed said, the electric vehicles have a lot of advantages, of course, because there is no zero emission from the vehicle as such. There's, of course, emissions related to this in the overall manufacturing of the vehicles, but then usually at around 70 or 80,000 kilometers driving, it all turns into something positive for electric vehicles. However you calculate it, there are many people that calculate it differently, but bottom line is, if you really calculate the total emissions, including the manufacturing, at a certain point, 80,000 kilometers, it turns in favor of the electric vehicles. So far, electric vehicles were complicated because in principle, they were more expensive than combustion engine vehicles, and that was actually something which triggered, only the premium products to be electric. But I think we have also seen this now changing. For the first time, actually, we reach a tipping point where electric vehicles are on par from a cost position than ICE vehicles, combustion engine vehicles. And the reason why I'm saying this is because that's a very, very important junction. Because if the battery prices will continue to drop, you will actually see that electric vehicles will be cheaper in future than combustion engine vehicles. And if this is the case, you will not be competitive anymore with combustion engine vehicles. And if this is the case, you actually see that the future will definitely bring us more electric vehicles, especially in smaller segments, not necessarily in larger segments, but in smaller segments. And then let's see who will actually win in this race, which we already see happening now.
Thank you, Andreas. Now, maybe shifting the lens a bit to more UAE, right? So maybe Anan, given that you've seen this more from a public transportation and the overall ITC perspective, in your view, what are the current challenges which, let's say, we are facing in the UAE with respect to adopting EVs, right? Both public and, let's say, private.
Thank you, Arvind. So today in the UAE, we're all going towards the net zero 2050. So we're all asking ourselves, what can we do? And the challenges that we have today is we're looking into the grid capacity is one, and also the cost of the EV infrastructure as well in the UAE, and also procuring, for example, the public transport buses. So basically, you're looking into a long-term plan that you'll need to do for this. But today, what we've done in Abu Dhabi Mobility is we've cooperated with industry leaders in manufacturing and technology leaders to support us in this project. Because today, government needs to work with a private organization as well to go forward to their, to the next, let's say, chapter of this, let's say, the new chapter of the EVs. So what we've done is we've let's say, we've got some new buses that we're testing, you can say. We're assessing it in our climate. As you know, our climate is hot and it's humid. So we're assessing this at the time being right now, and we'll come up with a report where we will share as well to everyone on what best technologies work for us. And from there, we will go to the next, let's say, the next chapter.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, I do hope that through your pilots and tests as well, like Andreas mentioned, the TCO eventually merges at some point, and that way across hydrogen or BEVs and so on, so you are able to kind of point in the right direction. Perfect. Maybe, Mohammed, to you in terms of a question, again, from a UAE perspective, right? So, again, more coming from, let's say, a private sector, startup kind of an area. What are, in your views, the things which could be done to accelerate the EV adoption which is happening in UAE? Because as we saw in the previous presentation, we are still talking about 3%, like very low single digits. So what is required to kind of push this to the next level?
Thank you very much. So before I answer that question, I have two very short announcements to make. So we are launching a GCC-wide network called Wahid Charge Network, which will unify all the OCP. It will be Arabic language, and it would also have the ability to store data in the region. So that's a number one driver. We're working with the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure across all GCC. That's number one announcement. The number two announcement is that we are launching Savvy Automotive, where we're going to be developing and manufacturing commercial vehicle in United Arab Emirates. That's coming up next month. So again, it's going to be an offshoot of Savvy Charging. Remember, we are a technology company first, and then a charging.
Yeah, maybe a round of applause for those two announcements, please. Yeah.
So going back to your question, what will accelerate? I think technology will accelerate that. And we have seen this. The charging technology is rapidly evolving. If you look at it, both from a battery point of view and also from an OEM point of view, everybody is constantly updating their technology, their software, their hardware to make it a bit more accessible, a bit more easy for everybody's sake, and this is why it's important that government entities needs to work with the latest innovative technologies to see those development happening and to quickly adapt to that. That would be number one driver for electrification adoption. The other one is the initiatives such as, government need to start, introducing things like green number plate. We've seen it, in other economies, etc. UAE being number 4 when it comes to globally for EV adoption. We hope that with these kind of initiatives, they would up the game to make themselves number 3. Obviously, Norway is number 1. and then after that, China when it comes to EV adoption. So these two things needs to work hand in hand in order to make sure the EV acceleration. Grid issues and other issues, we can easily tackle those, with the use of technologies that are coming. We are working on an off-grid technology where you actually don't need to rely on grid, so we can happily explain to OEM how you guys can actually accelerate, electrification and, push it to the end users.
Thanks, Mohammed. Maybe coming back to Ahmed, so from a partnership perspective, right? So again, you work with CharIN, which is all about, let's say, the unification related part. So from the importance of, let's say, PPPs and let's say the other collaborations, which could even be multi-country kind of a thing, right? So what are your views in terms of where could we potentially look into for driving such adoption further?
Sure. I spoke earlier with the 2x speed. We'll try to do the 1x speed now. So I think if you look at the transportation sector today, so the normal ICE ecosystem, you have a vehicle, when you need to fuel, you go to the gas station and that's it. You're not connected to the grid. You don't have to think about the tariff, but now you are moving to a very new, different economy where your vehicle is directly connected to the grid, whether you charge at home, you charge at the public station. Now you have to have different policymakers sitting together to make your whole experience actually convenient. So you need to regulate how the charger is installed, whether there's capacity to actually install the charger at that location, and then whether you have the right capacity in the location that people need to install a charger so the whole charging experience is convenient. All of this planning has to happen, and unfortunately, it has to happen after the infrastructure has already been there. So now you have to reverse engineer or see how you can actually update the infrastructure to accommodate all of this electrification that's happening in parallel, which is a lot of investment from the policymakers, from the regulators, from the utilities, and it's a lot of coordination to make sure that you have the right policies in place as well. You don't want to have a charger, but this charger does not have the permission from the right authority to operate within that location, then the charger is disconnected. That gives unclarity or uncertainty to the investors and inconvenience to the end user. So all of this has to happen smoothly, and that's why we sometimes advocate for an entity. I think Abu Dhabi has this already, where that entity is responsible for the local coordination with the different policymakers. At the end of the day, you as an investor, you need to have your life easier. So there's one entity that you are dealing with, you get the permission, and all the local permissions will happen in coordination with that entity. Otherwise, it becomes very complicated for investors. But then you're moving to that new sector. So unless there's a clear partnership model between the different entities within the one country, across the value chain, or also between the different countries. Why between different countries? Because today, UAE is perhaps leading across the region, but there are countries globally that have done what the UAE is trying to do many years ago. So how can we learn from the best practices from all of these countries? How can we enable this multilateral collaboration between the different countries to get the best practices, apply them, save costs, save time, make sure the experience is actually as convenient as it is from the beginning for the end user? And there's a lot of effort has been done on this, but I think one key aspect of this is there's different international associations today that enable this multilateral dialogues between the different countries to enable this. If you look at Europe as an example, you have different countries. You can drive one EV from one country. With the same EV, you can actually go to another country. And just to show you how important it is, that collaboration, 10 years ago, there was no standard for EV charging plugs. So every country can actually enforce a specific plug. You talk about CHAdeMO, CCS, etc. And if you don't have a standard plug, just imagine how painful the experience could be. You drive with a car, you find a charger, that's a different plug, I don't have the converter, I can't charge, I don't have enough mileage. So I need to truck the car to another station where I can find a charger. It's a very painful experience, and that's why we came in as CharIN 10 years ago, and the whole association was established to come up with one unified standard for global charging stations, and then we would advocate for the policymakers. This is the one standard. It might not be the best of today, but we keep updating this, so this is the most convenient standard. Then we try to educate the policymakers why it's important in general to have one standard. Same could happen across the GCC. Fortunately, they're all CCS today, but just to have a unified standard, and why that's important also from an OEM point of view, So the markets here are not as big as other markets in Europe and the US. So for the OEMs, if you have different standards for the different vehicles, the amount of vehicles, you ship them in one container, in one ship or multiples. But if you have one location, which could be you ship all the cars to Dubai, they get homologated, then you ship them to other locations, that makes it easier for the OEMs to introduce more EV models as well with the time. So that homogeneity between the different countries within the GCC is also very important. And that's where we have the GSO, the Gulf Standardization Organization, working on different initiatives on that one. So again, very essential to enable that collaboration between countries, which would save costs, save money, and give more competitiveness to not only the UAE, but the whole region. And that would eventually result into more convenience for the end user, more sales, more maturity to the market.
Thanks, Ahmed. One thing which I've seen across the presentations, not only here, but in many places, when we start discussing challenges, collaborations, all of these things, it eventually boils down to the EV charging infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's where, let's say, the core part of the market challenge which lies, right? So maybe on that note, right, so maybe for Anan, I mean, given you've also been working on, let's say, the overall green transport initiative, you've looked at multiple technologies together. So in terms of, let's say, the EV infrastructure deployment, so to Ahmed's point as well, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be easy to move around and so on. So what are some of the things or collaborations related items which you have also been looking at?
Yes, I agree with Ahmed and what he's saying in regards to the inclusivity of the EV infrastructure. I mean, it is important to have like access regardless of the location, be it in a rural area or a high-dense area. And prioritizing these EV infrastructure is important as well. So then people can as well change, like they can start changing into working towards to go to the EV vehicles to make it more attractive for them as well. I mean, for us in Abu Dhabi Mobility, we've been deploying this inclusivity within our public transport, let's say, fleet. So basically, we have deployed these green buses in high-dense areas so people can actually start using these vehicles and also be part of this change that we are seeing today.
Perfect. And maybe question for you, Mohammed. So again, from an infrastructure perspective, right? So what could be, let's say, the lessons which we can learn from some of the other economies which are there, either positive or negative that way?
Yeah, I think infrastructure is a #1 challenge, globally. This is not unique to UAE. And we learn from other economies how, they are trying and testing it. So that's why when we want to work with the government entities, we want to provide them a future-proof solution, not just a temporary solution to charge, next 10-year, 5-year, 6 years, and so on. That's why we're very much centered around off-grid technology, which we have developed here in UAE. And we want to remain independent because, just to give you guys a perspective, charging one EV at a 350 kilowatt hour, that means you're consuming around 100 homes power. So, also grid companies, they want to prioritize, they want to give power to homes or to, EVs, or charging them. So it's a bit of a dilemma. That's why collaboration is key for us. And we are, again, open for collaboration with any entity. We, by the way, reached out to Al-Batha as well group to see how we can work with the OEMs directly to ensure that, in the charging space, that there is enough collaboration, available by all the OEMs and all the OCP provider to give both investors and the end user ease to say that these companies have got a motive and a motivation to actually electrify us. Help us move towards that, But right now we see, a lot of variations. So this is what we need to get over it. I don't think a regulation will work because over-regulation in Europe is just made it worse, in this space. So I think it needs to strike that balance. Last point on the manufacturing. So, like I said, we are establishing manufacturing facility. Our manufacturing here is going to be far much more economical than China. For commercial vehicle, it's just like building Legos, basically. And we're open for, again, in this space as well, collaboration from, if there is a Chinese OEM or European OEM want to work with us, we're happy to. By the way, we have already some of them signed up with us as well. So collaboration is key in this space if we want to reach the 2030 target or 2050 target. Has to be open collaboration, open source kind of a technologies that's enabling different users to actually access what's available there, what's the best practice.
Perfect. Thanks, Mohammed. So before we open up for, let's say, a couple of questions from the audience, maybe a last question to you, Andreas, right? So again, speaking of collaborations and so on, again, we've spoken about the EV infrastructure aspect, but I also know that there are, let's say, technologies around battery swapping and so on, which are being looked at, right? So in your view, what would be the key collaborations which an OEM or, let's say, a particular distributor would seek for, again, with the element of increasing the EV adoption related part?
Yeah, I think there are actually a lot of areas where you would need collaboration and progress. I mean, one of the areas which are often forgotten is also that the battery technology as such, we see just phenomenal progress in the battery technology as such. That's nothing to do now with collaboration necessarily, but the new battery, I think the new battery technology that we'll see actually will enable us to, with much lower energy, really drive many more kilometers with a very safe, I think in a very safe manner and in a very safe way. So battery technology is really one of the key areas. We see a huge progress in this, and that will drive the entire industry forward. What else? I think when it comes to automotive, definitely, it is all kind of electrified versions. I think we see China originally having put everything on full electric vehicles. We actually see now, even in China, that the recent technical developments are very much in the hybrid technology, and you actually have superpower hybrid technology now, which enables to drive over 1,000 kilometers, which really takes away this whole fear of getting stuck somewhere without having proper charging infrastructure. So that is certainly a very important piece of technology which will help people to adopt electrified vehicles. And then I think, this has been mentioned, you really can't drive an electric vehicle without appropriate infrastructure. And infrastructure, I mean it in every way. It's the charging infrastructure, but it's also, I think more importantly, it's also the whole digital ecosystem around, which actually makes it very easy to use it, to get built, to have the proper data, to get advices on how to drive, when to charge, where's the grid at this current status. So it's a whole ecosystem which actually opens up so many of opportunities. And if we, I think if we see those collaborations happening, we definitely see this whole technology emerging and succeeding. I'm absolutely 100% convinced of this.
Perfect. Thanks, Andreas. Yeah, I think one of the elements, or let's say parts of the ecosystem which is currently not too critical for us, I believe, is also the recycling or the repurposing related part. I mean, currently we don't have the scale to kind of look into that particular area, but that definitely is one of those topics which is currently active in Europe and China and others, but eventually that becomes one big opportunity for, let's say, countries within GCC as well to definitely start looking into. Perfect. Yeah, maybe with that, thank you panelists for the discussion. So we are open to take any questions from the audience. So if there are any, please do let us know.
Any questions at all from anybody? If not, I've got one. But, oh yeah, we have got one. Round the front here, please. Thank you very much.
Hi. I have a short question on workforce. How do you manage the technicians and the workforce skills and the way that people need to maintain? Because we have been speaking about uptime, about network upgrades, installations, but you need workforce. And it's not just putting a cable in the ground, it's a little bit more than that. So I was wondering how you handle this in the UAE.
I would think that's a question directed towards the manufacturer, maybe more.
Well, maybe just just to add, I'm not sure if this if this answers really particular question, but when it comes really to vehicle distribution, servicing, the entire fleet management, I mean, we have spent a significant amount of money really in dedicated people that are skilled to service electric vehicles, that are actually able to repair vehicles.
Yeah, I get that, but I was more thinking about the network, the installation of the chargers. That's a different ballgame than maintaining cars.
Do you mean the cost of getting the workforce available, or do you mean the actual...
Just having them, making sure the people are there, because quality and uptime is related to the hardware, but also related to the SLAs of the technicians.
I think Saudi has a very good example. I'm sure if you heard of NAVA, National Academy of Automotive and National Automotive and Vehicle Academy. NAVA. So and actually you will be very impressed when you speak to the people actually in NAVA how proud they are of the jobs they do. I think in markets like the UAE, where you have a very small population and most of the youth will actually go to the high-end jobs, and you are left with the jobs which you have to fill. So most likely you have to import talent, which might be very challenging to sustain the talent in the country as well. But then you have the investment to actually build something like this. And I think what Saudi did is a very good example. Hopefully it will be something like this in the UAE, especially if you're moving into manufacturing as well. You need to have sustained talent in the country. And right now, the academic curriculums don't include this kind of jobs. You cannot have academically people trained to be vehicle technicians yet. I haven't seen this. So I think there has to be a collaboration between the private sector and academia. And this is what happened in other countries. Private sector will actually invest into getting those programs. Academia will take care of actually building the pipeline of the talent, so you have them. So even if people leave, you have others coming, joining, and then etc. It's a sustainable pipeline of talent. But really having them, so this is usually like, I think UAE also has a very good example of the High Technology Institute, HTI? High Technology Institute, I think.
High College Technology.
High College Technology, yes. Which is basically the more practical type of engineering college, which people actually get hands-on experience on this. So how you can add this kind of curriculums into the curriculum, so you have the pipeline of talent, it could be a strategic thing to do as well. Lots of work to be done on this, but I think there's some effort has been started already.
Yeah, maybe to add one element, I think you did mention that, yes, you can take care of cars. Definitely, yes, the distributors do have, let's say, the infrastructure and the capabilities in place. But usually there is also a secondary market of all of these small workshops which typically do exist, where some of the old vehicles or even, let's say, out-of-warranty vehicles go into repair and so on. We do have a challenge with respect to training all of those people to manage, let's say, high voltage power packs and so on. And there is a huge safety element which comes into play. And given there is a whole lot of, let's say, connected vehicle related elements as well coming in, that space as well will look at some form of consolidation which would happen. And you will see very small players running out, and there would be opportunities opening up for much more organized, let's say, workshop chains or so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Arvind. I think that's it. So can we please show our appreciation to Arvind and his wonderful panel? Thank you very much. Round of applause.